at 1 minute after the hour. So I'm excited to begin. And for those of you who perhaps this is your first time joining Frank Friday, this is, yes, it's a play on words. I am Frank. It is Friday, but also I'm going to be extra frank on Fridays. And I'm going to answer your questions that you pose in the message box. Feel free to do so because the great Chris Sampson, live from Kyiv, Ukraine, is actually monitoring your questions, and he'll forward them. Well, he's not going to forward them. He's going to tell me what the questions are, and we're going to answer them. And the way this works is, I'm gonna hit some of the news stories of the week. We wrap up on Friday. There's no shortage of news this week, but I have culled and curated, as they say, for you, what has grabbed my attention. And I'll start off with something that has just developed just as we were coming on the air. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but as we go through the outrages of the week, we've got a brand new one that I have not yet seen covered. So let's hit it, which is we are now learning from a Somali school, an elementary school in Minnesota that serves Somali families, and is a STEM school: science, technology, engineering, math. Yeah, they had a kindergarten graduation ceremony that they streamed because, a lot of the Minnesota Somalis have folks back in the homeland and they want to see the kindergartners graduate. And our president, I hate to say that, Donald J. Trump, has decided to grab the stream that someone else posted and repost. I'll give it to you here. This happened. We're just learning now because, of course, the threats now have come into this school. It may be an all-girls school or an all-girls kindergarten class. Not entirely certain, but we're learning about it now because they're getting inundated with threats. In case we're worried enough about school shootings. Now we have the president of the United States. And here's what he did. He did this on Wednesday. Trump reposted a video from a kindergarten graduation ceremony at Gateway STEM Academy, a K-8 charter school in St. Paul. In the clip, children wearing Gateway STEM Academy blue graduation gowns, including girls wearing hijabs beneath their mortarboards, sing in Somali as they celebrate the end of the school year. Trump amplified another user's caption, quote, "Every girl is in a hijab in kindergarten," end quote. The faces of the young children were clearly visible in the video shared with Trump's almost 13 million followers. And no surprise, here come all of the comments and responses that are ugly. I'm not going to go through them and give them airtime or my breath, but it's ugly, ugly stuff. And that is the president of the United States, who is a sick, twisted individual. And that news is breaking that the school now is getting these threats. I had not known that Trump even posted this because I don't follow Truth Social, right, which is neither truth nor social. Oh my God. Unbelievable. All right. Let's
You mean he would engage in stochastic terrorism? Unheard of.
Yeah, there you go. You're an expert on that. And you've actually, way back, we appeared on with Katie Tur on MSNBC together, talking about terrorism. It makes you sick. I had enough of, I have half a dozen things that make us sick, but this one here, so the Council on American Islamic Relations, which I'm very familiar with, has come alongside the school. The replies to Trump's post, include one user called the children future terrorists. Fantastic. As the local folks point out, the target in crosshairs has already been on the local Somali community in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Now this makes it even worse. All right, let's move on to what was going to be my lead story, which is yesterday, Donald Trump relieved all the remaining 3 serving commissioners on the Election Assistance Commission. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. I did not know a lot about this commission, and maybe you did prior to this firing. It's bipartisan. So, we can't have, this is why we can't have nice things. We can't have bipartisan people coming along and supporting the state secretaries of state in planning for elections, because he got rid of them all. He allowed the Republican member to resign. Oh, that was nice. But he fired the others. And if you're wondering what this thing does, what this Election Assistance Commission does, yes, you're right. The federal government doesn't run elections, but this was created as an independent commission. And that, by the way, that's going to become important, that word independent. Why? Because we have a Supreme Court decision, the Slaughter case it's called, where they have just recently given the president the power to terminate independent commissioners and people serving at the top of independent agencies. So a lot of folks, when I posted about this in their responses, said, Frank, how can you do this? This is illegal. There's going to be lawsuits. And all I did, forgive me if you took it as a curt response, but all I did was post the link to the Supreme Court decision in the Slaughter case. So if you think, something's going to turn out better here, I'm not optimistic, folks. This Supreme Court has pretty much said he can do this. Now, will there be litigation? Yeah, I'm sure, and you could look at the bright side and say, well, the Supreme Court carved out an exception, right? Didn't they say he couldn't fire the FTC commissioner? Yes, they did. I don't know what the difference is. I don't know what's going to happen here, but this commission's been around for, a couple of decades, bipartisan, and it leaves us with some questions. So first, what do they do with the Election Assistance Commission? Their job is to disperse grants. I see this as perhaps the most important thing they do specifically, and I'll get to a macro level thing. But specifically, they do dole out election security money and administer grants for that to the states. That's important, folks. And actually, we're seeing the erosion of security generally around elections now by this administration as part of what I am now convinced is a plan to make things less secure, right? When you see the president threatening to take away Homeland Security grant money to states that don't turn over their voter registration records. Why is he choosing to that? He could say, I'm going to withhold highway funds, right? I'm going to withhold whatever. No, he's going to withhold. What he's threatening is, I'm going to withhold DHS counterterrorism and security grants. Similarly here, what is one of the main functions of this Election Assistance Commission? To dole out election security grants. Yeah. Can you say, well, I think this is clear evidence that he's trying to have us attacked and have a mess? I would say this. If I were trying to make things a dangerous security mess leading up to the election, these are some of the things I would do, folks. Yes, indeed. And so what happens? That's one of the things they do. Otherwise, their main job is to ensure consistency and to provide the states with a federal election form that they go by, so that we do have, yes, we have 50 different ways of voting and all of that, of course, and balloting, but we don't have chaos either, right? We have conformity and compliance, and they serve as a sounding board for secretaries of state who need help and need to get their act together and all that. Is there good news here? Yeah, there is. There is, in the sense that the staff has not been fired. And maybe Trump hasn't just figured that out. But the staff remains in place. And that includes like a general counsel and other staff members who still can administer existing funds if they've already been allocated by Congress and continue to push them out. But they can't do everything. And one of the things that they can't do is any new policies or revisions of existing policy. And you might say, gee, that sounds good because Trump wants to change everything about voting. Yeah, but I think that's why he got rid of these folks. They were not with the program, because in the official statement from the White House, it says, I have the right, something like, I have the right to fire people who aren't with the program, right? They aren't consistent. Their views are not consistent with my policies and vision. And that's what he's blaming it on. And here's my guess, and it's a guess. He tried to say to them, we're going to do elections differently. We're going to require ID in the form of a passport or a birth certificate. And they likely balked at that. And they said, you're fired. So what's going to happen now? Because if he leaves the staff in place, at least we have people who answer the phone. The other thing he could do is just name all Republicans who are on board with him and create total havoc. But as I research this more, it looks like the Senate would have to weigh in on that. And I got to tell you, I think increasingly, as part of the cracks in the armor that I keep noting, I'm not sure the Senate's going to let him put people in place that are absolutely going to turn the election completely upside down. They know, the senators know, we talked about this last time. They know that if you mandate birth certificate or passport, you're hurting Republican voters also. And as one of my previous guests had said, Julia Kayyem, you may actually be harming Republican women more than anyone who cannot produce a birth certificate or passport that has with their married name on it in a hurry. But that's where we are. And I see this for the big picture now is clearly this is a major step with Trump showing his cards. I want to create absolute havoc for November. I want federal control of this election. I want the SAVE Act passed. And if you don't do it, I'm throwing a tantrum. And if we combine that, if you say, well, this sounds very Machiavellian, and I don't know, Frank, you tell me there's this massive strategy. Well, in his head there is, and I think that Stephen Miller is helping to drive this. Let's add to this what else happened this week. The Justice Department, you want to talk about intimidation. The Justice Department has sent letters warning election officials in all 50 states and D.C. that they will face criminal prosecution if a non-citizen is caught voting in their state. They will get criminally prosecuted theoretically if one non-citizen is caught voting in their state. You think that's intimidation and harassment? Folks, let's remember, it is extremely rare. The last numbers I saw, out of the tens of millions of people who vote, there were 100 cases, perhaps, of people who were not authorized to vote. Yet, we're going to prosecute Secretary of States and other election officials. Now, I've read the letter. This kills me to say who this comes from, because it comes from the, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, folks. Last time I worked for the Justice Department, voting was a civil right. And now apparently, we want to make it very hard to do that. So Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, who heads up civil rights at DOJ, gave states 5 days to explain how they will comply with federal voter eligibility laws and maintain, quote, clean voter lists. And they say you can be criminally prosecuted if we catch one. And so I saw a sentence there, and I caught the first part and I went, oh, okay, actually they're being reasonable. And then came the second part of the sentence where they're not being reasonable. The letter says state election officers can be criminally prosecuted for aiding and abetting non-citizen voting. They said any election officer who knowingly, this is a reasonable statement, right? Any election officer who knowingly retains non-citizens on a statewide voting registration. And I go, oh, well, okay, that sounds like a lawyer. No one's going to knowingly put a non-citizen on a voter registration. Okay, well, here's the next part of the sentence. Or who facilitates non-citizens receiving and casting ballots will be subject to criminal liability. Facilitates. What does that mean? The mail-in ballot went, you let this person vote and they pull the fast one on you. We're at the point where we're threatening with prison election officials if they don't do what Trump wants them to do. It is
Well, I think Ashley asks the perfect question. Under which law would the DOJ use to prosecute?
well, I don't see that's a great question. I don't see a cited statute. That's never stopped anybody before. But presumably there would be some election fraud violation, right? And yeah, I could probably find something like that if you certainly I could find it if you're knowingly putting a non-citizen on a voter registration list. But with regard to facilitating it, if you've done your due diligence and someone's pulled a fast one on you, I don't see the requisite intent and knowledge for this. And so I think this is a
And wouldn't there be a mens rea requirement in this, essentially, from a legal point of view? You just wandered into accidentally helping a terrorist organization is one thing. It's like, oh, well, I saw the ISIS logo.
Yeah.
Like,
No, yeah. This is outright intimidation. And I love the response from, let me see if I can find it, from the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, right? We all know her, and she's got her act together. And I think she's correct. Somebody in the messaging, please tell me, isn't Jocelyn Benson running for higher office? Is she running for governor, folks, in Michigan? My gut tells me she is. Anyway, she took this for what it was, which is, this is intentional act of intimidation. She's kind of blowing it off. She's kind of going, yeah, right. Sure thing. You do that. Anyway, threats, intimidation, imprison election officials. Unbelievable. And let me move on. And if we have any questions there, let me move on to the Epstein case, because I'm never going to stop talking about it. Did we get confirmation that Jocelyn Benson in Michigan, the Secretary of State, is running for governor? Or
yes, Benson is running for governor of Michigan, says Jackie Kerr. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Also, friends, please, if you have questions about what is happening here, you can also, if you already do like I do, if you already kind of know the question, but you think the people in the audience might want to hear it out loud with Frank, put it in the space here and we will read it out loud. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chris. All right, Epstein, New Mexico, trying to do the right thing, finally. You know that they've opened an investigation. But what you may not have heard yet is yesterday, they formally accused the United States Department of Justice, shocking, I know, of hindering the state's investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. And of course, the Zorro Ranch there in New Mexico, where many horrific things are alleged to have happened. Specifically, the state of New Mexico. I mean, think about the times we're living in. So we just talked about Trump threatening. Well, for God's sakes, we started with Trump resulting in threats against a Somali school in St. Paul. We moved on to threatened prosecution by the federal government of election officials in the state if, God forbid, a non-citizen shows up, even if they didn't intend to have that happen. And now we've moved on to a state. One of our 50 states is now pointing at the Department of Justice and saying they are obstructing an investigation of pedophilia. You cannot make this stuff up. And specifically, they're obstructing by withholding unredacted files on the late sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. The Democratic-run state reopened an investigation in February, you know that, into activities at Epstein's former ranch south of Santa Fe, where he's accused of abusing women and girls for nearly 3 decades. There's other allegations, too, I think, involving males. Just about everything happened there. And there's also allegations of buried bodies on the grounds of that ranch. But we're 5 months into this investigation in New Mexico, and they've got nothing, folks. They've got nothing, and they've got nothing from the DOJ. The Trumps has suggested we move on. So has Todd Blanche. I'll be talking more about Todd Blanche in a minute. He's got a big week coming up, folks, next week.
Right.
Yeah, and listen, they say Todd Blanche said he's failed to respond to a state request for unredacted files containing names of Epstein survivors, witnesses, co-conspirators, and other individuals essential to the New Mexico investigation. Now, you're going to love this response by DOJ to this. Okay. Because, Blanche is going to say, well, I did respond. Well, here's his response. The DOJ reiterates that it welcomes New Mexico undertaking additional investigation of the Zorro Ranch and stands ready to provide necessary assistance with New Mexico's investigation. Folks, if you think you're going crazy, you're not. This is they stand ready to assist.
It's like a surgeon sitting in the office going, "Do you need me? I think you do need me. Okay, call me if you need me.
Yeah, call me if you need me. I'm right here. I'm here for you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, but I'm sorry. Did you need my help? Yeah.
It's so crazy.
This is lunacy, folks. Oh, we're here to help you. Yes, please. We told you in February we need the unredacted names. I'm sorry. Do you need my help? Yeah. There we go. Folks, I've said it before. This, in case you're wondering, Frank, what's your position on this Epstein? It's a cover-up. There's no other way to look at this at this point. There's no other way. No other way to look at it. It is a cover-up. And we have a state finally trying to do the right thing, apparently, and they are stymied. Let's talk about trying to do the right thing in a different context. And that is Harris County, Texas, a huge county. Chris knows Harris County in Texas. I mean, vast. It's where Houston sits.
665 square miles is the size of Houston, by the way, off the top of my head.
Yeah, but
it may have expanded by about 100 in the last 4 years, but 665 square miles is essentially the size of Houston.
Right, and folks need to understand it is one of the very few left-leaning. Not only Houston as a left-leaning city, but as the county itself has been, and it drives the governor crazy. But now we've had a tragic fatal shooting by ICE in Houston Tuesday, and a Mexican national. Here's what we've got so far, folks. As every day, almost every hour, new information comes out on this, and none of it's good, folks. So at first, it's early morning in Houston. A man in his 50s, 52, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Araujo. Arroyo. His job is to pick up his men, his workers, and take them to their locations. I think construction.
Yeah.
And he's been doing it for years. He's a father. He's been in the U.S., folks. I kid you not, over 30 years, 35 years. He is in process to become a citizen according to his family. Okay, this gets me to another point, which is, why is ICE, other than trying to get their numbers up, why are they even bothering going after people trying to do the right thing? And in process, guy's been contributing to the community. Good guy, by all accounts. Anyway, he's in his white van. Early morning, he's going to make the rounds and pick up his team for work. And unmarked ICE vehicles, I say ICE, but I'll just say unmarked vehicles, overtake him, and he is shot dead. The shots are in his abdomen. He's screaming and crying on the street. There actually is video of that. that unfortunately his son had to see, his adult son had to find on social media. That's how his son found out that his father was shot, found out on social media. And here was the first ICE version of events, which has now changed. We were on, and I can't stand this phrase, they use it every time. They used it for Alex Preddy. They used it for Renee Good. We were on a targeted operation. Every sentence starts with that. We were on a targeted operation. And the implication there is what? That their target was Lorenzo Salgado Arroyo, right? When I heard it repeatedly, I went, oh, okay, so they were after it. Well, as the week goes by, we find out, no, that's not right. No, he wasn't the target. They were, and again, if you say, Frank, haven't we been through this drill? I thought they were going to back off of this. I thought that guy who allegedly took the 50 grand in the Cava salad bag, Holman, Tom Holman. I thought he said, hey, yeah, we are going to ease off of going after people on the way to go after people, right? I've talked about this. It would imagine, I'll give this example again. Imagine an FBI SWAT team at Dark 30 going out to get some drug dealers in the city, but on their way, right? They've got the paper, the search warrant, whatever, the arrest warrant, but on their way, they see something that, I don't know, a brown person, and they decide, hold on, time out. Let's go get this guy. That is this equivalent. So they essentially, they saw a white van. They claim that we're looking for a white van with a brown person. We were. That's what we were doing. And yep, we got the wrong one. We shot the wrong guy. And so what the story is, and if you've heard this before, it's because you have. Well, you know what? We pulled him over, unmarked cars, and he drove his van at us and used it as a weapon. Have you heard this before? And we shot him dead. And so there were at the time 3 other people in the van, including his brother and 2 of his employees. And guess what? They say, no way, no how, folks. That's not how it went down. And there is security. There is video of what looks like it's just the beginning of things or the middle. I'm not sure, but it looks like they are chasing him. Not because there's no. If you say, well, he smashed, because they say he smashed into our cars. There is no evidence of any damage to his van. And the video we're seeing now is that they were chasing him. He's not chasing them. So, and family and friends are all going, this is not a guy who smashes into cars, folks. That's not who this is. So I'm not buying any of this. And I will tell you something. Again, the theme being trying to do the right thing. Number one, Lorenzo was trying to do the right thing by being in process, according to his family, and to gain citizenship after being here over 3 decades, folks. I don't know how long he's been in process. We'll find all of this out. The other person who's trying to do the right thing is the Harris County District Attorney, Sean Tier. So this gets very interesting because the mayor of Houston, now remember that the mayor is not the county judge, they call her, she's not the county commissioner. The mayor of Houston's its own city with its own police department, right? Mayor Houston gets out and goes, he's trying to have it both ways, right? He says, well, we would investigate this, but, it's federal and, sovereign and, it's not, they won't give us anything. And so we have no authority to investigate the feds. So sorry. And I got to tell you, that's a wimpy answer. I'm sorry. But Governor Abbott has threatened Houston before with pulling funds out for various things like, the mayor of Houston had initially backed the Houston PD not fully cooperating with ICE. And then Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, came in and said, oh, yeah? Yeah, we're going to take all your money away. And, and then suddenly, okay, we'll help a little bit. But anyway, here comes the county district attorney, Harris County. who shows up at the scene. Uh-huh. And he's looking around. And he says publicly, I have opened an investigation. Now, he's reasonable and he says, look, I don't know how much evidence we're going to be allowed to have. I just realized that the family can't even have their father's body. The county medical examiner has it. The county medical examiner has no shock here, has said declared it a homicide. That all that means to a medical examiner is that this was a death caused by another human, the act of another human. No kidding. There's a couple of bullet holes in his abdomen. But the county DA is taking, I think, a lesson from Hennepin County up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, right? They are trying to prosecute ICE agents up there. And yeah, they've got limited evidence, but they're trying. And that's what needs to happen. I get it. I believe me, I was a federal agent for 25 years. I never wanted to be prosecuted by a county or state, right? And of course, you better believe I would have said, official duties, take me to federal court, get me out of here. This typically happens. But we have a situation, folks, where we can't trust the feds. I'll give you an example. In this case, they said the FBI is handling a civil rights investigation to determine whether Lorenzo Arroyo tried to strike the federal agents. Okay. And the DHS is doing the shooting inquiry to determine whether it was a valid use of deadly force. Here's what's wrong with that. I've never seen, by the way, there were times in my career where I did supervise civil rights investigations and certainly shooting investigations. You don't open a case when the subject is dead. So there again, the FBI is saying, well, our piece of this is to determine if the deceased tried to drove his vehicle at the agents. So what? So you can charge him? He's dead. What? That sounds to me like a shooting inquiry, which DHS has said they're handling. So this does not make sense to me. I'm just telling you, you don't open a case on someone with the intent to prosecute if he's dead. So this is not making any sense to me. And DHS doing their own shooting inquiries would have been fine several years ago. It's not going to cut it now, folks. And in fact, the mayor of Houston has said, I wish there would be an independent investigation. Well, sir, you could do that. But Harris County DA apparently is going to try to do it. Obviously, members of Congress, only Democrats I've heard so far, only Democrats from Texas are rightly incensed. And we'll see where this goes, but the story gets worse by the hour in Houston, Texas. All right. This next one, there's a trigger warning because we're going to talk, folks, about explosive diarrhea. Yes, you've heard that right. Hopefully this is not dinner hour for many people. But let's talk explosive diarrhea, and you know what I'm talking about. And ordinarily, I would not have that as a topic on a law enforcement, intelligence, and national security show. But it is a topic because we're now learning that there are over 1,000 known, and even that, by the way, even whether or not we truly know an accurate number of infected Americans, we have over 1,000 cyclospora infections across the United States, making people extremely ill. This is not just a bad day or two, folks. This is 2 to 3 weeks in many cases with serious weight loss and dehydration that could put you in the hospital. Why am I talking about this? Otherwise, I would not, except we are now learning that the Centers for Disease Control, led, of course, by the most powerful scientists in America, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who does not have a science degree, but has a law degree, has stopped monitoring this. They did away with the program called FoodNet that tracked food poisoning infections. And it started with 8 pathogens that had to be tracked by the CDC's FoodNet operation. We're down to, I kid you not, 2 pathogens is all the CDC looks at for foodborne illness now. 2. And guess which one was among the 8, among the 6 that were cut? Cyclospora. Don't ask me why, I don't know. But if you're sitting here dumbfounded that we still, weeks into this, have not a clue as to what is causing this. And I mean, we know generally from history, and thank goodness for doctors, telling us what's going on TV at least, that it's often it's foodborne, it involves fecal matter, no kidding, incoming and outgoing, and exposure to that. Usually, historically, it's fresh produce. Although I'm hearing it could be frozen produce. So we're reading these very weird recommendations, which unfortunately we're left with. It's like we're a backwards country now, where experts are going, look, we don't know, we can't trace this because we don't have the people, we got rid of the tracking. And so we just have to tell you, don't eat salad. Don't eat bagged salad, especially. Don't eat raspberries because they have nooks and crannies where this stuff, even if you wash them, you might have a problem. And it's 2026, folks. And we can't figure out why we're sick because the government just willy-nilly decided to cut monitoring certain foodborne illnesses. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. And no, is this particular item a national security issue? No, but if you joined me last time, you heard about a real national security issue, which is that they weren't making flu shots mandatory for Air Force candidates, and they were really sick, pretty much shutting down much of an Air Force base in San Antonio, Texas. So we're killing ourselves, and we have no other explanation except maybe Doge came in and said, cut 20% of your budget, 40%. And it was done by people who don't know what they're doing. Let's move on. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, the food monitoring program has been in place for 3 decades. And someone just decided, let's get rid of that and just track a couple of these pathogens. So it's garbage in, garbage out.
Are bananas on the list?
I would think not. Bananas are, and well, here's another guy with a law degree telling you what to do for foodborne illness, so be careful. But I would think that if you've got a good, strong peel, rind covering, you're probably okay. Yeah.
Shout out to our great journalist buddy there, Josh Rogan, who just stepped in. Good to see you, Josh. Don't forget, friends, you can put your questions in space. I have a lot of your kind of comments and feedback over the topics already in the list, but don't forget, we are taking your questions. And don't you appreciate this commentary? Push a subscribe on Frank's account and make sure we pay him. Here's why I say that, because one of the first accounts, real quick, I'm going to put you on the spot again. Frank, I miss you on MSNBC after the Minnesota story, etc. But I'm going to say, but we have him right here. He's directly with you. And on MSNBC, he wouldn't answer your questions. Now he does.
Yeah, and I couldn't take an hour to answer your questions on MS either. So that's kind of cool for me. Okay, let's go now to this. This is squarely in my bailiwick. Next week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has invited senior ministers from around the world, from 60 nations, to come and talk about anybody, what would in all the busyness that Secretary Rubio has. He wears 10 hats. He's the National Security Advisor. He's the Secretary of State. I don't know if he still heads up the archives or USAID. He destroyed that. So, you know what he's doing in the middle of a war? He's convening a meeting. He hopes that 60 countries come. And he's going to talk about Antifa. Yes, Dave Van Curran has it right, Dave. We have a winner.
Dave
Dave is right. He's going to talk about Antifa. And he wants all of them to get on board on the topic of, quote, a major peril, resurgence of transnational far-left terrorism. Resurgence of far-left terrorism, because, that is the major peril the world is facing, folks. We have Sebastian Gorka, the administration's counterterrorism czar, to thank for putting this on the front burner. Another highly qualified guy. And,
sorry, when you say Gorka and counterterrorism in one sentence, I just snicker. Bad habit.
So so while I chuckle, here's where this is going, and here's what they're trying to do that you need to know about, right? So first you might go, well, Rubio's trying to keep Trump happy, so he's going to tell Trump, I invited 60 countries. I don't know if they're coming, but we're going to get on this Antifa thing. It's deeper than that and darker, because what they're trying to do, folks, is declare a foreign nexus to left-wing domestic terrorism, okay? And once they have that established, that's what asking these 60 countries to do is all about. Give us the hook we need. Show us some foreign money. Show us somebody who called their uncle in Italy to say Merry Christmas, Bon Natal, who also is anti-Trump, and God darn it, then we'll have a foreign nexus which makes this international terrorism. And ladies and gentlemen, once you have international terror, you have some serious investigative tools at your beck and call. This whole toolkit opens, and you have laws for real now. For real laws like material support to international terrorism. What else can you do? You can now, for real, not the fake stuff that Trump does on social media and says Antifa is a terrorist organization. You can, for real, designate Antifa an international terrorism group like Al Qaeda, Boko Haram, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And once that's happened, all bets are off, and the FBI is unleashed, and the CIA is unleashed because it's foreign, right? And now we're targeting people who are domestic opponents of the president and his policies as if they were Al Qaeda. That's what they're attempting, folks. This is not Marco Rubio saying, I'd just love to sit down and have some pastry and coffee with my friends. That's not what's going on here. And it's not just trying to appease Trump either. There is a plan. I'm saying this from my experience and from knowing what Gorka's about, what Stephen Miller's about, which is, let's get the foreign nexus on Antifa. Let's get everybody rowing in the same direction across 60 nations.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if there's any good news in this story, it's that we don't really know if everybody's going to show up. So, for example, some Republicans, none of them have the guts or courage to speak out, by the way. But some of them are fearing, some within the Trump administration fear that if we do this, declare opponents of the president a foreign international terror organization, future Democratic administrations could use the tactic against conservative activists. Yeah, no kidding. And the example this unnamed official gave, who has no guts, quote, the idea is you're setting a precedent for a future Gavin Newsom administration to turn those authorities on conservatives. Well, yes, if Gavin Newsom has
round up the Proud Boys finally after all of that, because Frank, we said this back before the insurrection. I argue with people that I said I personally would not qualify Proud Boys as a terrorist organization. I know Canada did. I have a lot of legal problems with them. I'd call them street gang. I put a lot of categories on them, but I wouldn't put them in the international or even domestic terrorism category until Jan 6. They had a lot of different things we didn't like about them, and I would tell people, no, 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 seriously, there's kind of a line we draw here
Yeah,
between those guys and these other guys. And
yeah,
now it's all. I think you make a great point. What happens when the office is reversed, and that bar has been lowered so low? Pretty much, I don't like someone gathering to say something I don't like is now the standard.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, this harkens back to Martin Luther King Jr. and J. Edgar Hoover,
Mm-hmm.
because what Hoover was seeing, because it's not. Let's understand something, that if you're really tied to the rule of law, the fact that a foreign body or foreign money has been offered to you is interesting and worthy of investigation. But Hoover was using that to say that Martin Luther King Jr. was foreign sponsored
Mm-hmm.
and a communist. Boy, haven't we heard communist in the last couple of weeks over and over, as Trump refers to.
Marsha Blackburn has a fortune cookie. So yes.
She has wait, what? She has a fortune
Oh,
cookie?
oh, you haven't heard about this? Oh, she
No,
put
no.
out a fortune cookie. She put out crushing fortune cookies, and we're going to stop Chinese communism.
Oh,
It's the dumbest commercial you've ever
oh no.
seen.
Yeah, and the thing is,
She got it all racked up. Yeah.
those fortune cookies are
Don't
probably made in
don't
Milwaukee
need
or
a
something.
fortune cookie to tell you
Yeah.
what's happened in the future. But
Oh
the other
my
thing,
lord!
didn't the news come out that there was a significant um because of the SPLC case, there's a significant sum that was used to try to infiltrate Antifa in this group. So after all the discussion of SPLC infiltration, it's like, wait a minute. So let me get this straight. You were going to pay an informant to infiltrate Antifa? I thought you were about to charge someone for getting paid to infiltrate groups. This is so messed up. I need a
Yeah,
new abacus.
yeah. Just let's tie that to something else we heard this week, which is that Trump asked or pondered aloud a question as to whether or not the warehouses that were being purchased and the government space that were being purchased by DHS, some of which now they're selling off, could be used, quote, to house communists, unquote. Now, it sounded like he was saying that in jest, but it also sounded like that thought is in his head. Like what
Sure.
he refers to the Democratic Socialists as communists, and now saying, can we put the communists in these camps or warehouses? Folks, the man has lost it. Um, Speaking of communism,
We're going to rendition you to the Islamic State of Japan.
yeah, did you folks? I mean, the unraveling, calling it with an international audience in front of world leaders, referring to Iran as the Islamic Republic of Japan, referring to Zelensky as Putin. And there was another significant screw up also, which sometimes you could say, well, the guy's on a very different time zone. He's probably out of it. Yeah, but he's out of it all the time now. So
Did you love did you love the response from Zelensky when he was asked, would you go to Moscow? He goes, not so safe there. There are Ukrainian drones in the air.
oh, nope, I didn't. Nope, I didn't.
Yeah, that
Yep.
was his response. Everyone here,
But
that's the ultimate Ukrainian response.
cool. So
Would you go have a negotiation in Moscow? No, it's kind of unsafe there right now.
as um as Trump ramps up the communism cries, right? We're going to hear this now every time a Democratic
Yeah.
socialist wins something, and it's a phenomenon and a movement. And I'm not the political strategist, but it's worth paying attention to. But he's angry about it, and that's going to be
Yeah.
a major issue for the midterms. Is you're going to see the Republicans just bashing people over the head as communists. Okay, when by the way, I've not heard anyone say they're communists, but nonetheless, let's talk about communism and socialism, because we have now. I don't know if you heard this all the way in Kyiv, Ukraine, Chris, but we have Freedom Fuel Network. Are you familiar with Freedom Fuel Network?
Please tell us.
Okay. So in the Philadelphia area, there are gas stations calling themselves part of the Freedom Fuel Network, and they have voluntarily lowered their gas down to $3.47 a gallon. And you might say, why 47, Frank? Well, because in honor of our 47th president, they're selling at $3.47. Okay, it's an undercut of the state average by about 50 cents. That's a big deal. Okay, it's a network of 25 gas stations, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Well, Trump got a hold of this and tried to claim it as his own. He's, yes, we're on the forefront of lowering gas prices. And initially I thought, my God, the guy's got, this is going to appeal to a huge number of people. This is amazing. This guy, how has he done this? He's lowered gas prices. And then I thought, I got to look at this some more. And then I found out, oh no, it's a scam. It's completely privately owned gas stations. And by the way, the experts, the economists in the fuel industry say this can't sustain itself. You cannot sell at $3.47 a gallon. You'll be out of business in a few weeks. So two things.
Right.
Couple of things are going on. One is Trump tried to scam us again and say that somehow he had something to do with this. He has not. And in fact, a White House spokesperson had to come out and say, here we go. A White House official told ABC News that the Freedom Fuel Network is a private company, not associated with the president. So the White House now is actually having to go, no, he screwed up again. No, he's scamming you again. But for a minute there, I was having fun with this. Why? Because government subsidized or government owned gas stations is tantamount to socialism or communism. If they, do they own the means of production? Are they doing this in a way that evens out the pricing?
Wow.
That's exactly the kind of thing that Republicans are flipping out about right now and accusing people of. And here, the president, not understanding the difference between socialism, communism, and capitalism, decided he would glom onto this and say, I'm doing it. I'm on the forefront of this. Until his own spokespeople went, no, not really. All right. Next week, I hinted at this, folks, and we're wrapping soon. So next week, I will be covering the nomination hearings and confirmation hearings for one Todd Blanche, the current acting Attorney General of the United States, soon to be, we think, the real Attorney General of the United States, who still thinks he's the private attorney for the President of the United States and has served as the President's criminal defense attorney, and is still stymieing the Epstein investigation and still holding back documents and still playing games with the state of New Mexico and with the Congressional Committee looking into the Epstein case. This is the same person who said, I don't know what the big deal would be about putting ICE agents at the polls. Yeah, and a dozen other things that disqualify him to be the Attorney General. I'll be covering that. That hearing starts on Wednesday. My guest on Monday's show, the Frank Figliuzzi Show, 2 p.m. Eastern, my guest will be the executive director of the Justice Connection, Stacey Young. Why? Why Stacey Young, and what is the Justice Connection? Over 1,200 former DOJ employees, myself included, have signed and presented to the Senate Judiciary Committee a scathing letter, explaining why Todd Blanche is an awful choice to be Attorney General of the United States. And that organization of former DOJ employees from across the DOJ agencies, including the FBI, is called Justice Connection. It's headed by former DOJ employee Stacey Young. She is my guest on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on Substack. Please join us so you can get really smart on Todd Blanche and why this will be an awful decision if he's made Attorney General. And I always end on good news. Right here, 5 minutes away from the 1 hour mark, here comes your weekly good news. And yes, it's somewhat sarcastic. I'll warn you ahead of time. Eric Trump's Bitcoin has failed to the tune of $600 million being taken from his family fortune. The Trump family is now minus 600 million because of Eric Trump's specific decision on his company called American Bitcoin Corporation. He owns mining of Bitcoin, and he thought that's the way to go, to be in the mining of Bitcoin business. It has bitten him. See that? See what I did there? Bitcoin. It has bitten him. And I bet Daddy is not happy that the family has lost $600 million. Too bad. Sorry to hear it. Couldn't happen to a better person. Chris, do we have any questions pending that we can tackle?
We actually have a good dose of, but actually I can summarize them into a couple of things. I think that this is good. The main thing about the ICE discussion was talking about the possibility of they said if the Democrats get a hold of the House and Senate, can ICE be sued or changed? And then similarly was could they be prosecuted? So people were concerned about or wanted to know about prosecution of ICE. That was one of the main ones.
All right. So if we're talking about, we did explain, of course, that in Hennepin County, Minnesota, they're trying and have actually lodged charges.
But like at the federal level, if you got the DOJ back, right? If you got the DOJ back under control.
Yeah, except that here, yes, but except, and now we're getting into something that many of us talk about when we're not on the air amongst each other. And I've talked about it on the air. So let's get there. I believe Trump is going to literally do a blanket pardon, probably of every ICE agent, on his way out the door, whenever that is. Okay. So yes, if the right smart people win the next election and we get a real attorney general, we may decide we're going to try to go after some of the worst, use their own language. We're only going after the worst of the worst. We should do that for ICE agents. There will likely be a blanket pardon. And boy, are those agents acting like they've been told, don't worry about it, we're going to take care of you? Yes, they are. This nonsense of continually jumping out of cars and getting in front of vehicles when it's against all of your training. And then just stopping on the way and stopping brown people because you just saw them on the way to your so-called targeted enforcement. That is absolutely against all training and is the act of people who think they can get away with anything. Yes, I think Trump will blanket pardon. But yes, let me go there and say, I believe we need tribunals. I believe we need hearings, a la the Nuremberg trials. And whether that's done internationally with us, I don't know, but it's an increasing topic of conversation among legal experts and formers, as we call ourselves, about how that happens in the face of a blanket pardon. But I will also say this. There's another way this could happen that wouldn't be as dramatic, which would be, let's go to this incident this week in Houston. Let's say that a state or county wants to pursue an ICE agent for what happened in their territory. And whereas right now, the DOJ would say, oh, no. Federal employee, federal duties, no. What if we had an attorney general someday who said, okay, because the pardon, yes, he's been pardoned. That agent's been pardoned, but only federally. So go at it. Go at it, Harris County or Hennepin County. That could happen that way too. What else? Anything else?
I will say real quick that in 1989, on October 30th, a woman named Ida Lee Delaney, who was only 50 years old as a grandmother, was shot by HPD, and basically change happened after that shooting in Houston. People were sick of it. They wanted to. It was before there was like cop watch, but that was the early stage of that kind of era of police accountability. So Houston has an actually documented history of reforming its own police department because of these events. So to think that Houston would, I'm not a big fan of necessarily John Whitmire immediately. I don't know his record, but I knew our last mayor. This city will want to take some action because it's in the history to clean up that police force. So that's there. Now, one question, basically, I think the last question would be this: can anyone actually be put in jail or contempt of court for failing to release the Epstein files?
Yeah, it's a violation of law. Absolutely. So take what I just said, and how that might work. And let's go ahead and assume that Donald Trump is going to pardon Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. And so you think, well, all right, now we can't pursue that anymore. You either have these tribunals, these Nuremberg-style trials that are kind of new and different, folks.
Sure.
Or you allow states like New Mexico, right? Florida, depending on who's in charge, because that's where Epstein lived also. And you say to them, look, there's a federal pardon, but if here's all the stuff that we held back from you. If you develop a case and it's somehow within the statute, or we argue that the statute of limitations was on pause while you were being obstructed, it is possible. And, we're still actively witnessing obstruction, aren't we, from Blanche, DOJ, and others on the Epstein matter. So that's an active thing happening. And so I would predict we'd see something happening soon after we get a new reasonable president. Hey, good question to end on because it's somewhat hopeful, folks. I want everybody to have a good weekend, get some rest, unplug, spend time with friends and or family. And I will see you Monday, where we cover Todd Blanche and the confirmation hearings coming up. Chris, as always, thank you. Please follow
Thank you
Chris
right back.
Sampson. If you say, boy, I do need to learn more about what's happening in Kyiv, boy, are you going to get some real-time things going on, including active videos of missiles incoming into Ukraine. And he's made me smarter on Kyiv. So follow Chris Sampson on Substack as well. Consider subscribing.
And Frank, likewise, thank you for being here and bringing your many, many years experience to us. Also, I've said this before, I like that the work you do behind the scenes keeps you busy and you do it for these people. So big thank you. And again,
Yep.
my response is also to the subscribers here. Don't just do a basic subscription, do a paid subscription. Let's keep these guys like Frank here with us. We got tired of cable news. And I will say this, Frank, the thing that ticked me off the most, there's two things that ticked me off the most this week that are tie into our stories here. One, CNN used the phrase analysis about Taylor Swift's wedding, so I don't understand that word analysis. What did she need analysis for? And Houston Chronicle did not even run the ICE shooting. Why does that matter? Because traditional news is failing us. You're getting it right here with people who are experienced instead. So good night, everybody. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. And I will say this about the Houston Chronicle. They are now deep into the coverage.
They are now. They were dead quiet for the first 24 hours. I had restaurants closing that's only about 8 months old, so I didn't understand that. Real estate, everything but that. And I used to work with them too many, many years ago, and I'm a journalist, so it gets really personal when I see them put fluff on the front of the page, and they don't put something very serious up there. It gets.
And who else is doing a great job is NPR, National Public Radio.
Amen.
They are now totally unafraid to do anything, and so they're at it. They're
good.
It's great. All right, folks, have a good weekend. Take care.
Cheers.